birthmarks. Imagine you're in the 15th century, just trying to avoid the plague, when a simple birthmark lands you in a witch trial. Let's dive into the bizarre history of birthmarks. Back in the day, if your nosy neighbor spotted a birthmark on you, they wouldn't just say, "Hey, cool birthmark." Oh no, they'd scream, "Witch!" In those times, birthmarks were called the devil's mark. People believed the devil himself popped down, gave you a little skin doodle, and bam, you're on Team Evil. It gets crazier. These devil's marks were thought to be numbed by evil magic. Witch hunters would jab them with needles to test for pain. If you didn't react, congrats, you're a witch. But here's the kicker. Some witch hunters used retractable needles, the kind that look like they're poking you but really aren't. Even if you did react because, getting poked hurts, they'd claim you were faking it. Basically, you were in a no-win situation. Sleepwalking. Imagine living in a time when wandering around at night could land you in a witch trial. Back in the day, people were superstitious about everything. So, if someone was caught sleepwalking, eyes closed, mumbling nonsense, they were instantly suspected of witchcraft. Science wasn't around to explain that Uncle Ted had a sleep disorder. Instead, it was, Uncle Ted's chatting with the devil. Get the torches. Nowadays, mumbling a few words while sleepwalking is no big deal. But back then, if you so much as whispered in your sleep, you might as well have been casting an evil spell. And if something bad happened the next day, like the blacksmith's horse catching a cold, guess who got the blame? Yep, poor Uncle Ted. Sleepwalking in the Middle Ages was a risky business. One minute you're snug in bed dreaming of medieval feasts, the next you're the main attraction at the local witch trial. Whistling. Yes, you heard that right. Whistling could get you in serious trouble back in the day. In some areas, specific tunes were thought to hold magical power. There was this one jingle that, if whistled, could supposedly summon a wind strong enough to turn your neighbor's roof into a medieval frisbee, and another tune was said to curdle milk. Seriously, if you had the power to whistle up some witchcraft, wouldn't you aim higher than ruining Bertha's breakfast? But hey, who am I to judge a witch's priorities? It wasn't just about the tune you whistled. The location mattered too. Whistling near certain trees? Obviously, you're holding a meeting with your witchy friends. Whistling while walking past a graveyard? Clear sign you're trying to wake the dead. Whistling inside a church? Huge no-no. There were even beliefs that certain tunes could communicate with animals. Imagine minding your own business, whistling a happy tune, and suddenly a cow looks your way. Next thing you know, you're being dragged to the town square because Bessie the cow seemed a bit too interested in your whistling. You were left-handed. Imagine being accused of witchcraft just because you're left-handed. Since most people are right-handed, left-handedness has always been seen as a bit odd. But during the Middle Ages, folks believed the devil himself was a lefty. Naturally, if you were left-handed, they thought you were a witch. It gets even weirder. In court, your word meant nothing if you were left-handed. You could be telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and they dismiss it as the devil talking. So, if you're a lefty watching this, be glad you're living in the 21st century. The worst you have to deal with now is a smudged hand after writing. Yawning. Imagine being told that every yawn is an open invitation for demons. In the Middle Ages, people believed that yawning with your mouth wide open was like rolling out the red carpet for demonic spirits. Yep, you heard that right. Demons. The idea was that when you yawned, your soul could slip out. And if your soul stepped out, guess what could step in? Demons. There's some wild history behind this belief. During the bubonic plague, people were dropping like flies. And one of the main symptoms was, you guessed it, excessive yawning. Naturally, folks back then connected the dots in the most medieval way possible, figuring yawning was the Grim Reaper's way of snatching souls. If you didn't want to become demon real estate, there was a simple solution. Every time you yawned, you had to make the sign of the cross over your mouth. It was like a spiritual padlock. Not doing this was basically like leaving your front door wide open. When a baby yawned and was too young to make the sign of the cross, an adult had to step in and do it for them. Owning cats. Imagine your adorable kitty being seen as a minion of the devil. In medieval times, owning cats, especially black ones, was a huge red flag. Why? Well, cats are nocturnal, a bit mysterious. And let's be honest, they sometimes look at you like they're planning to unalive you. So, when your neighbor Martha sees you with your cats, she's not thinking, "What a lovely bunch of kitties." No, Martha's running to the local priest, claiming you're raising an army of the devil's pets. Next thing you know, you're standing in front of an angry mob, trying to explain that Mr. Paw just likes to chase mice, not souls. The irony here is that cats were actually fantastic for pest control, keeping the rat population down. And, if you remember your history lessons, fewer rats meant less risk of spreading the bubonic plague. But hey, who needs logic when you've got superstition, right? So there you are, trying to convince everyone that Mr. Paw is more interested in sunbathing than serving the Dark Lord. But does the mob care? Nope. In their minds, every purr is a secret spell, and every meow is a message to the underworld. Cat sneezed near you? Imagine your cat sneezing, turning you into a suspected witch. We've already established that in medieval times, people thought cats were practically BFFs with the devil himself. So, if a cat sneezed near you, folks believed it was more than just a little achoo. It was a chit-chat between you and your feline friend. Now, let's connect the dots. If a cat, known to be the devil's buddy, sneezes near you, then you must be on friendly terms with the devil too. What does that make you in the eyes of your superstitious neighbors? You guessed it, a witch. Brewing beer, brewing your own beer might be a hipster hobby now, but in the Middle Ages, it was serious business, and mostly done by women. Before the days of bearded guys in flannel shirts, it was the medieval ladies who ruled the brewing world. But if you were a woman who brewed beer a little too well, you might find yourself in hot water. Imagine your beer is the talk of the town, so good that folks start scratching their heads, wondering how you do it. Medieval people weren't exactly champions of logic, so naturally, jealousy turns into suspicion. Next thing you know, rumors are flying that you're chanting spells over your brewing pot, because obviously, that's the only way your beer could taste so good, right? Let's break down this medieval brewery setup. A big pot for the beer, a sturdy stick for stirring, and maybe a cat or two roaming around to keep the mice away from your grains. Pretty standard brewery gear, right? Well, this is also the starter kit for a classic witch stereotype. Big pot for witchy potions? Check. Stick? That could be a broomstick in disguise? Check. Cats, who were already seen as friends of the devil? Double check. And there you have it. The origins of the witch stereotype we know today, being too good at making cheese. Imagine being so good at making cheese that people think you're a witch. Picture this. You're living in a small village where everyone's trying their hand at cheese making. But yours is just on another level. It's creamy beyond belief, tastier than a feast at the king's castle, and always, always comes out perfect. Now, your neighbor Dave, his cheese is a disaster, like he's trying to invent a new type of rubber. And old Betty's cheese? It might as well be used as bricks. But there you are, churning out perfect cheese every single time. Naturally, people start to wonder, how is it that your cheese is so good? What's your secret? Back then, folks didn't know much about bacteria or temperature control. They saw someone dominating the cheese game, and their medieval brains jumped to one conclusion: witchcraft. Rumors start to spread. They think you must be stealing the goodness from their cheese. The idea was that a witch could magically take the quality from someone else's cheese and add it to their own. Sounds bizarre, but that's the kind of thing people believed back then. Having double yolk eggs. Imagine living in 16th century France and discovering your hens laying double yolk eggs. Today you might think, hey, bonus protein. But back then, not so cool. Double yolks were seen as unnatural, a freak of nature. And who could be behind this? A witch, of course. In those times, people believed that if your hens were laying double yolk eggs, you must have either cursed your own hens or were using these abnormal eggs for witchcraft rituals. Instead of marveling at the oddity, your neighbors might be grabbing their torches and pitchforks. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.